Glad to be here. We want to utilize every minute. I'm going to take you through a hard journey. We're going to descend into the death of innocent people, teenagers just like you. And then on the other side, we're in a state, takes a human being, puts him in a cell for 20 years, takes him out and kills him. And says to us, that is what we need to do to be tough on crime. I know the arguments for the death penalty. I've heard prosecutors at death penalty trials. And you have to know that most of the practice of the actual death penalty, where the actual executions have happened in these 35 years, have been in the deep South states that practice slavery, where you find the harshest incarceration for the longest sentences, the toughest penalties, are in the deep South states that practice slavery. And the more we understand about the legacy of slavery, the racism that has infiltrated systems, nowhere more has it infiltrated than the criminal justice system. But what happened, it started in the 80s, and there was a rise in crime. So you begin to have people running for public office who are saying, hey, we got to do something. We got to fight fire with fire. These people are killing innocent people. And we can't, they are so bad in their character and in the crimes they have done, we can't trust them to be put in prison because they're natural born killers. These are evil people, they're unredeemable, and they're going to kill again. And the only thing we can do as a society is we got to terminate them for the safety of society. And politicians ran on that. I mean, you know, this is the first time we have had a presidential campaign where we actually have candidates running for president who are not seeking the death penalty, who are calling for an end to the death penalty. And it's coming along with penal reform. Because death is like the apex of the criminal justice system. Not only do we give the power of the government to put people in prison for a long time, but even to take their lives. So people are scared of crime. And here they have every politician running for office saying, this is what we got to do to be safe. And it's not that the American people are more vengeful than other people in the world. Yeah, we want to kill the criminals. People were scared. And we got to do something to stop this crime. And what could be a better deterrent than you going to kill somebody and you think, yeah, but they might kill me. Because isn't self-preservation one of the deepest things in human beings? So it would be a deterrent. And it would make people think twice before they just kill a person or kill the witnesses so they couldn't testify against them. And that's how we got to the death penalty. You did the death penalty here in New York for about 10 years when George Pataki, Catholic man, ran for governor, and he wanted to reintroduce the death penalty into New York. It was part of political currency. He got points when you were tough on crime. And he did it. He got elected to office. You had the death penalty for 10 years. You spent millions and millions of dollars. You put a couple of people on death row, and in the end, your state Supreme Court found the statute unconstitutional. It's a lot of legal intricacies around capital punishment. Now, what made that man, George Pataki, Catholic, went to Mass, but he reintroduced the death penalty into New York. And it was happening all over the country. I never dreamed I was going to be involved with the death penalty. I mean, you could hear, I was a teacher, worked in religious ed. And what happened is, and I just finished writing a book about this, about waking up to the gospel of justice, that Christianity is more just like being charitable to people around you. Those of us who are privileged, which is everybody in this room, you're getting an excellent education here at McQuaid. You have agency in your life and you're going to be able to do stuff. That's privilege. I didn't know, didn't realize, had to wake up to, that the gospel of Jesus is calling us to the margins, to the people that haven't had the chance we have. Or especially if they're people of color, they're Native Americans, that they have their color against them, that there's a prejudice against them, like, oh, these people are lazy, or these people don't want to work, slavery's long over, why don't they get a grip? Why don't they send their kids to school? Why don't they get a job? And it's easy for us who have come up with resources and privilege to make those judgments. So what happened to me, and I wrote about this in River of Fire, is I woke up. And God's grace wakes us up. You already have put yourself in a situation. In this school, there's a climate. I got it as soon as I walked through the door. As soon as I began to meet the teachers. That you are going to be men for others, and that you're going to work for justice in the world. That's what you're called to do. I had to wake up to that. I was 40 before I woke up to it. And when I did, I moved into the St. Thomas Housing Project, an inner city. And for the first time lived among African American people as my peers, and they began to be my teachers. I had never heard the word white privilege, that simply by being white, I could walk in a room and people were never going to turn me away simply because of my color. And I began to learn it was like moving to another country in a lot of ways. Coming out of an adult education center where we were helping people get their GEDs, I was appalled at what I was learning. Because here was a kid who had been in the public schools in New Orleans, not a private Catholic school, public school, and he wanted to get his GED, and I said to him, how far did you get in school? And he said, well, I was a junior. I said, well, look, you have one more year to go. And so let's see your reading level, see your math level. And he could not be a third grade reader. He was a junior in high school. And he was going to graduate, and he couldn't read. And it threw me back on St. Joseph Academy, a girls' school, very similar to this one, where I had good teachers, and I learned to develop my gifts. I learned public speaking when I was a junior in high school. I use it almost every day of my life. And here's this kid who's in a school system where he can't read and he's about to graduate. I was learning everything about the criminal justice system mostly. And one day, coming out of this adult learning center, a friend who worked in the prison coalition office right down the street from Pope House where I was working said, hey, Sister Helen, you want to be a pen pal to somebody on death row here in Louisiana? And I thought, I could write letters to somebody. And I said, sure. And it was the early 80s. We hadn't had an execution in Louisiana in 20 years. I never dreamed this person was going to be executed. I thought I was only going to be writing letters. So I have this little thing about Jesus. I mean, when you study theology and study about Jesus, I want to add a quality of Jesus you got to look out for, that Jesus is sneaky. Sneaky Jesus. What sneaky Jesus did to me was, hey, you want to write a letter to a death row? Yeah, I'll write the letter. The problem was he wrote back. I wrote, he wrote. I visited him, and 2.5 years later, I am there when he's electrocuted to death by the state of Louisiana, and I witnessed it. It's in the preface of River of Fire, my memoir, and it goes like this. They killed a man with fire one night. They strapped him in a wooden chair and pumped electricity through his body until he was dead. His killing was a legal act. No religious leaders protested the killing that night, but I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And what I saw set my soul on fire, a fire that burns in me still. Fire is passion. Fire is when we get gripped by somebody and go, wow, that's wrong, I gotta do something. And the epigram in River of Fire is from St. Bonaventure. Ask not for understanding, ask for the fire. So when we have passion, and God's Spirit gets a hold of us and calls us to do something, that's where the fire comes from. So, why was I visiting this man on death row? What did he do? Why do we say that states shouldn't execute people? Let's go to the crime. Let's see what this man, Patrick Sonnier, and his brother Eddie Sonnier, on the night of November 4th, 1977, did. How did he happen to get on death row? Was he innocent? No. He wasn't innocent at all. He and his brother, on this night, ended the life of two beautiful kids, just like you. David LeBlanc, 17 years old. Loretta Bork, 18 years old. And their families, their whole life is going to change, and they're going to go through grief and suffering and the way of the cross of their lives like they never imagined. Seeing David and Loretta leave that night to go to a homecoming school in Catholic High in a little town in Louisiana, and they never see their children alive again. And when David and Loretta, after they left the game, they went to this place to park. It was kind of an abandoned place. It was near a sugarcane field that had been harvested near a little southern town down in Louisiana. And all of a sudden, they look up. And there are two guys standing by the car. Before cell phones, it was, you're out there. And you look up, and there are two men standing by the car, and they have 22 rifles. And they're saying to you, hey, you're trespassing. We're the security people who work for the people that own this land. And we're going to have to turn you into those people. All that was a lie. All of that was, okay, get in the car, we're going to take you to the people, and driving these kids around, handcuffed together in the back seat, terror in the lives of these two kids. And then before this night is over, Loretta was raped, and both of these kids are found lying face down in that sugarcane field with bullet holes in the backs of their heads. Their lives abruptly ended, and they are ripped out of the family. And the grief begins for the mother and father of both these children. That is what got Patrick Sonnier on death. That is what led them to seek the death penalty for the brother Eddie too, although his sentence was overturned and he got life. And so there's a part of us that says they deserve it. That's what the death penalty is for. They killed, they died. And if you've ever been, it's up been many times, to a death penalty trial, and when you have that prosecutor up there who's seeking justice for the people now, prosecutors seek justice. You gotta know this. They never have to seek the death penalty. You can seek justice by saying this person's done this terrible crime, I'm going to put them in prison for life so that they can't harm anybody anymore. You don't have to seek that. But when prosecutors do seek that, and they're doing a closing argument to the jury that is now going to go behind those closed doors, these 12 people, human beings, pulled out of their ordinary life to do this judgment of life or death. And that prosecutor is saying to them, don't give him your sympathy. He doesn't deserve human rights. He didn't respect the human rights of his victims. And look at that family sitting there, and they're never going to see their children graduate from college, or they're never going to see their grandchildren, and do justice for that family. And what he means by that word justice, there's only one thing that'll be true justice for them. And it is that he took the life of their loved one, he gives up his life. A life for a life. A death for a death. That's justice. Is it? And what does it mean when we descend into a system now where we're going to give over to government that kind of power? When the Supreme Court put the death penalty back in 1976 in the Greg v. Georgia decision, they said the death penalty is only going to be reserved for the worst of the worst crimes. Only the worst of the worst. And they thought by setting up that guideline that when juries were going to decide if someone lives or dies, they're only going to go for the crimes that are the worst of the worst. How do we determine what's the worst of the worst? And in a way, when any human being is killed, and their life is taken, and they're unique and irreplaceable, is that not the worst of the worst? Because they can't be replaced. So you're going to have then, you enter into what the criminal justice system, So when you had the death penalty for 10 years in this state, you had your state legislature went and had to devise the statute, how we're going to determine in New York who can be, what's a capital offense and what isn't. And so you got to make distinctions. That's the only way the law works. So you say, well, if you kill a policeman, that's the worst. But you can make a distinction. Not if you kill a fireman, not if you kill a public health nurse, but if you kill a policeman. Another thing you put into the statute, if you kill a child. But you got to define child. So here at the hearing, you have these parents, when the legislation's being done, saying, our boy was killed, he was the light of our lives, but he happened to be 14 years old, and when you define child, it's got to be 12 or younger. Doesn't our child deserve the death penalty? Isn't his life just as valuable? And you start making distinctions. Whose life is worth the death penalty? Whose isn't? And we fall down an endless, endless hole. Not only that, once we put the death penalty out there and began to seek it, we see a huge difference in practice. As I began by saying, up in New York, up here in the Northeast, you had the death penalty, New Jersey had the death penalty, Connecticut had the death penalty. It was scarcely ever practiced. It was on the books. Politicians would use it, but you really didn't kill them. But in the South, in my state, Louisiana, we killed 8 people in 8.5 weeks. Texas is still killing people. They have the pipeline, and on average, every month they're killing the person. They have killed over 500 human beings. So you look at this huge disparity of practice. And when in the law, you see a huge disparity. Look, these people are doing it all the time. Look, this pocket in Oklahoma City, this guy, Cowboy Bob Macy, prosecutor, he got 54 death penalties. And right next to him in another county there, the prosecutor's not getting any. He's not going for the death penalty. How can you call that equal protection under the law if there's no equalness, if there's no pattern of fairness in the application? Something's around. And then what's also helping us and to change our consciousness in this country is the huge number of innocent people, wrongfully convicted people that got caught in the death trap and the death net when it was set out. Supposedly now only for the worst of the worst, and we now have 167 people. And maybe you see or hear their stories coming on. Hey, you got the wrong one. And when you look systemically, how the thing is built, you begin to understand everybody on death row is poor. If you're poor, it also means that when you go into trial, you're not going to be able to hire your own crackerjack of an attorney who's going to file pretrial motions, fight the death penalty every inch of the way, so that prosecutors think 10 times before they would take you on publicly in a death penalty case and maybe lose. Every single person on death row is a poor person. And then we look at what difference that makes in the kind of defense you get, and you see that's one of the main ingredients, how you can have innocent people along with the guilty. The huge moral thing we have to deal with is the outrage we feel when innocent people have been killed. And there's a part of us that just says, I know if it happened to my sister, to my mother, to my father, I'd want them to die too. And the truth is that that's the starting point for most of us. But then our faith. Then there's the call of Jesus. Love your enemies. Pray for your persecutors. What could that possibly mean? Is that even possible for human beings? How could victims' families heal? What they promise with the death penalty is, where the state is saying to them, the prosecutor visits the family and says, we're going to go for the death penalty. Sometimes you even see families after a death penalty trial coming out of the courtroom like this. V for victory, we won. He got the death penalty. And then they begin to wait. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
And then what they promised is we're going to summon you. You're going to get to sit on the front row when we, the state, killed the one who killed your loved one, and you get to witness that. That is going to heal your heart. Can a victim's family witnessing another act of violence, can that heal the human heart? And now I got to tell you the story of the hero of Dead Man Walking. I'm not the hero. I made some mistakes. My biggest mistake was not reaching out to the victims' families right away. I didn't know how to reach out. I was learning everything. When we did the movie of Dead Man Walking, when Tim Robbins, who did the screenplay, was the director of the film, the Academy Award winner, it's a great film. All the while he was writing, he kept saying, well, the nut is in over her head. Well, I was. I knew nothing about the criminal justices. So here I am, I'm meeting this man on death row. I believe in his human rights. I don't want the state should execute him. But I didn't know what to do about the victims. They were so in grief and trauma, and they're angry. And I stayed away from them, and it was a big, big mistake to stay away from them. I didn't even write them a note and say, maybe you don't agree with me on the death penalty, but I'm so sorry about David, your son. I'm so sorry about Loretta, your daughter. I'm praying for you. I pray that you can have the community around you, the grace of God to keep. But I did nothing. And I didn't meet the victim's family until the worst possible time you could meet a victim's family. And it was a week before Patrick Sonnier was executed. It was a pardon board hearing. And that's the last little hoop you jump through. All the victims' families were packed in that room with their friends and their relatives, and the prosecutors had told them, you be there for that pardon board hearing and don't let them deprive you of your justice. And I met them at the pardon board hearing, and why was I there? I was there to ask that pardon board not to kill Patrick Sonnier, but to let him live his life in prison. And that's when I met the victim's family. Everybody was Catholic. The Sonnier brothers who had done the crime, the LeBlancs who had lost their son David, the Borks who lost their daughter, me, everybody. And I met them. The pardon board had gone behind closed doors to vote, and we were walking outside. And I rounded a corner and ran right into the two sets of parents. The Borks, whose daughter had been killed, and we run into each other. They look at me, they were furious. They averted their gaze like this and just walked past me in silence, and right behind them were the boys' parents, the LeBlancs, and I expected to say they deserved their anger because I had done it all wrong. And surprised by grace, we never know what God's grace is going to do in us. And Lloyd LeBlanc, the father, walks right on up to me with his wife. You were right there. He goes, Sister Helen, I'm Lloyd LeBlanc. It's our son David who was killed by these two brothers. Sister, all this time you've been visiting those two brothers, and you didn't once come see us. You can't believe the pressure we're under with this death penalty. In fact, as I got to know him, he said, in fact, you and I would go to different parish churches for Mass on Sunday, hoping we'd hear a priest from the pulpit talk about the gospel of Jesus, because he knew that the gospel of Jesus was calling him not to ask for death on top of death. He knew the words of Jesus. Pray for those who persecute you. In fact, when the sheriff's deputy had come for him that next morning after David didn't come home, and went and knocked at the door and said, Mr. LeBlanc, I think you need to come with us because we need you to identify your boy in the morgue. And there he goes. And there was David, so young, alive, this wonderful, wonderful kid. And he looks down on his dead son. And the prayer that rose to his lips was, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And he says the prayer over the body of his dead son. And he had come to the words,
in the Our Father, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. He said, sister, I said those words, but I didn't feel those words. And he said, I began to make my way down. David gone. I almost lost my life. You were almost mentally broke. In fact, we had to change David's grave. We buried him in a little town in a family plot. We had to move his body to a cemetery near the house because his mama can't make it through her day without visiting her boy's grave every day. And he said, I was so angry. I was angry all the time. It was consuming me. And see, that's not who I am. I've always been kind. I've always helped. And now I hear myself yelling at my wife and my daughter Vicky, and I'm losing it. And he said, I kept saying, Jesus, you gotta help me. You gotta help me. I know what you call me. And this man is going to teach me the real meaning of forgiveness. He said, sister, everybody thinks forgiveness is weak. In fact, when I said you got pressure on us about the death penalty, it's because I had everybody saying to me, Lord, they killed your boy. You can't forgive them. It looks like you didn't love your son. How could you not ask for the death penalty? You had the ultimate loss, you're not going to ask for the ultimate penalty. You must not love your boy. And he said, that's all I had around me. And then I had this consuming anger. And the way he described grace coming to him was, he said this, he put his hand out like this, and then I said, they killed our boy, but I'm not going to let them kill me. And he knew that anger inside was going to kill him. And he taught me then, forgive means to give before, not to let the love and integrity in us be overcome by the hate, so that we become hateful too and say, yeah, we want to kill. Well, we'll make it legal. We'll let the government do it, but we want to kill, and I want to be there when he dies. It's a very human journey, and almost everybody starts out there with all the victims' families I've known. But you don't have to stay there. And Lloyd LeBlanc didn't. In fact, when grace came to him, and he understood that forgive means I'm not going to let that hatred take over me. I'm not going to lose my soul, myself, and who I am. He was the one who reached out to Pat and Eddie Saunier's mother, who lived in this little town of St. Martinville. And the hatred in the town was so great, not just against the brothers who had killed two innocent teenagers, but it extended over to the mother as well. People were cutting up dead animals and throwing them on her front porch. Teenage kids were driving around her house at night going, mother of the murderer, mother of the murderer. And she couldn't go into stores because she'd overhear and say, there she is, that white trash woman. It's her sons that killed the LeBlanc and the poor children. She didn't go out, she stayed in. She had a blind strong. She had her daughter bring her groceries. And one day she hears someone on the front porch and coming to her front door. She opens the blinds and sees it's a man. He's got something in his hand. And she opens the door, and it's Lloyd LeBlanc. And he hands her a basket of fruit. And he says, Miss Sonia, I know you've been having a tough time in this town. I want you to know, look, I'm a parent. You're a parent. As parents, we really never know what our kids might do. I don't hold you personally responsible for what your boys did. And if you need me, you call me. And he gave her his phone number. When she died, not too long afterwards, he was there at the funeral. We see grace in Lloyd LeBlanc. That's why I say he's the hero of Dead Man Walking. So it's a big struggle for us because we're pro-life Catholics, right? We're for life. Here's where we get into now the Catholic journey that we've been on in the church.
which means us as the people of God begin to have part of the dialogue. We have just happened on August 2nd, 2018, where Pope Francis officially changed the Catholic Catechism for all of us around the world, that in no circumstances will we allow governments to impose death on its citizens under any circumstance. Now, when you see something like that happen, and you have to see that on moral issues, on deep dogmatic issues like Jesus is the Son of God, we can't make it to heaven without grace, that's never going to change. But moral issues, because we grow as a society, do. The church upheld slavery for a whole number of years. Plantation owners would get up and say, Paul said in the epistles, slaves obey masters. So you had priests in the pulpit preaching to plantation owners. Slavery is approved by God. What happened? How do we change that? People had experiences. Don't ask for understanding, ask for the fire. How did slavery change? Us, the people of God, that we have the gospel. And I picture it like this. More and more people began to experience what it meant. Maybe like a woman in Jackson Square in New Orleans. You have St. Louis Basilica. She goes to Mass. We had one of the huge auction blocks of slavery right near that basilica. And so she's coming out of Mass, and then she walks by. There on the auction block was a woman and her 3 children. She's being sold to one slave owner. The children are each partitioned off, and they're being sold. And she's reaching toward her children, and she is crying. And that woman sees that and says, she's not property. You can't treat people like property. And there's a change of heart. And then she begins. We change in our consciousness from our level of involvement with people, which is why when you go to the margins, when you experience people who are homeless, when you have the experience that we have that divine presence of God in our hearts and the Holy Spirit in our hearts, and we create change. Now, let me tell you about one little part. Helping the Catholic Church, change that happened on that day. I was one part with many, many others. It's never one person that ever changes like, hey, let's not have slavery anymore. That's wrong and that's against the law of God. It's always all of us, community. Holy Spirit moves through us as a community. So as I'm continuing to take people on death row and accompany them, I also accompanied 2 people who were innocent. They were caught in the system. The truth never came out at trial. They had such an adequate defense. And did you know that if it's your trial, if your defense lawyer does not raise a formal objection so that it gets in the transcript, yet no appeals court will consider that issue. For example, W. Gillis Williams, African-American man with an IQ of 65 who was railroaded in this little town in Louisiana. He looks out and his jury of his peers is all white people. A white woman had been killed. He was accused of a murder. And that's the jury of his peers, and his lawyer did not object to the all-white jury. And so it went through, he got a death sentence, and that no appeals court would ever look and see, did he receive a fair trial? Is that really a jury of his peers in this little southern town that he had all-white jury as a black man? Can you picture that shoe on the other foot for 1 second? That a white person is on trial for a murder and looks out and sees an all-black jury? We can't even picture that. That's what happened. And the second man, and this is in the book, The Death of Innocence, was Joseph Liddell in Virginia. Well, the people of Italy got involved because they're really deeply involved in human rights. In the case of this man, Joseph Liddell, who was innocent, he was just trying to get a DNA test, which was not afforded at him at trial. He didn't have the money. He was deprived of it. He had somebody offer it for him free. That DNA test would show he was really not the murderer, and the courts wouldn't let him have it. Said, you're doing this too late. The people of Italy got involved, And Pope John Paul II hears about Joseph Liddell. I, through this man, Joseph Liddell, who's spiritual advisor I became, I got to have a direct dialogue with Pope John Paul II. And you got to know that when Pope Francis finally did the finishing touch and changed the catechism, Pope John Paul II had a big hand in moving us toward abolition of the death penalty in all circumstances. When you have a chance to talk to the Pope, you don't talk to the Pope any different than I'm talking to you, like we don't have these new Pope words you use and all that kind of stuff. But what I said to him was, Your Holiness, does the Catholic Church only uphold the dignity of innocent life? I get it, we're pro-life Catholics. We're for life from womb to tomb. But I meet so many Catholics who say, oh, I'm pro-life. I'm against abortion, I'm against euthanasia, but I'm for the death penalty because we're making a distinction between innocent life and guilty life. I said, Your Holiness, when I'm walking with a man to execution, and I was describing Patrick Sonnier, he's shackled hand and foot, he's surrounded by 6 guards, he's rendered completely defenseless. And that's the key thing. That's the moral, pivotal point where the church changed something. Because the teaching of the church has always been that societies were allowed the death penalty to protect society, for the defense of society. And here I am saying to the Pope, I'm walking with a man, he's completely defenseless. He's going to be strapped down, defenseless, and killed. Where is the dignity in taking a human being and rendering him defenseless and killing him? Don't we have prisons and a way to keep society safe, a way to defend society without the state imitating the killing, without the state repeating the killing as the only way to keep? And it's the fact that the person's rendered defenseless. You got to know that part of what is happening, helping us shut down the death penalty around the country, it's been the witness of guards and wardens that have had to do the killing for us. There's this warden, Rob McAndrews, in Florida, and he took on Florida Penitentiary, and he said, I took it as an honorable profession. I'm going to help these men get their lives together. And then he finds himself in the execution chamber twice. And he is the one that has to give the signal to the executioner of a man that's strapped down and defenseless, so that he is a direct participant. In fact, he's the first trigger, because he nods to the executioner behind the one-way glass, and then the person's killed. And he used to do this, I don't know if he still does, but would give public talks and say, I'm going to be in therapy the rest of my life because I helped to kill defenselessly. Now, I know it's legal. I know the Supreme Court said it was all right. I know the Pope said people want it. But boy, when you're close like that. And I tell the story in Debbie Walking about a guard, Sergeant Goodman. He was supervisor on death row in Louisiana. And I think he could have kept that job and retired. But then he said, Sister, I was moved over to the execution squad. And my job, along with 6 other men, was to strap that guy down when it's time to kill him. And he said, I come home after these executions and I can't sleep and I can't eat, because in my gut, I know I helped to kill a defenseless person. And it's that moral act where we don't have to kill people in this society to be safe. We have the penal system. And then the fact that the death penalty is that we're shutting it down, we're also beginning to look at the mass incarceration of human beings, where we have thrown them into exile, the largest incarcerator in the world. That is where our poor are. All poor people in prison, and overwhelmingly people of color. So we can feel the change happen as we awake to consciousness, as we awake to the dignity of all human life, even those who are guilty. So I want to say for Pope John Paul II, I was part of the dialogue. A lot of other people were part of the dialogue too. But when he came to St. Louis in 1999, for the first time, we had a pope who put the death penalty in with the other pro-life issues. And in St. Louis, publicly, he said no to abortion, no to euthanasia, no to physician-assisted suicide, and no to the death penalty, which is cruel and unnecessary. Even those among us who have done a terrible crime have a dignity that must not be taken from them. That is the message of Jesus. All life is redeemable. Think of it, to have the arrogance that we as human beings are going to make a judgment. You are going to go into eternity. You're never going to change, and we're going to kill you. To take a human life that we have not given, to take it. Think of the arrogance that's in that we're going to take on God's life-giving authority on ourselves. And we're making mistakes right and left. People are waking up. Everybody is worth more than the worst thing we ever do. That applies to everybody sitting in this room, including me. Because as human beings with that spark of God in us and that potential in us, we can always change. We can always become better. You can never identify a human being with a single act and say, that's who you are. Maybe you got involved in something and there was a little ring of you and you found a way to cheat on exams. And then, how would you like to be known? Oh, yeah, that's who you are. You're the cheater. That's who you are. That's your essence. And you know that's not all I am. I got under pressure. Man, my grades will fall. We had this little ring going. Found a way to find out the test question. You know, we get involved in situations sometimes we do bad things. That's not who we are. We are so much more than that. And that's the gospel. Everybody's redeemed. Everybody can change. We are all worth more than ours. And I want to end by saying, do not let anybody tell you, because you are a young person, that you are not capable of great things. And we are seeing in this world at this time, young people leading us on two really important moral issues. We see the leadership of the young, of Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old girl from Sweden, who got off of school and sat in front of the legislature of Sweden to call the leaders to climate change and the crisis of the earth, because her conscience was sparked and she got into this mission and is still carrying it out. And the young people from Parkland, the school where the shooting was, saying that we have to start dealing with gun violence in this country and have a way that we can have safety checks on guns, so that we have these assault rifles that people can go into a room and kill with rifles that were meant to kill a whole bunch of people. Why can we not have a ban on those rifles and to have a check on people before and they call it for gun safety. And they're out on the road. And they're famous saying, thoughts and prayers are not enough, we gotta act. So, I'm really happy to be talking. I'm happy to be here for Quaid. I've met some teachers, met some of the people who work with you in campus ministry. And now I get to meet you. I know it's kind of one way, but I think we could use our last. Do we have like 10 minutes? What's the time? How are we doing? Oh, it's 10:30. I think we're done. Thanks very much.